The sound of police sirens sliced through the cool evening air as I stood frozen on the gravel driveway of my lake cabin. The blue and red lights painted the pine trees in flickering colors. 2 police cruisers screeched to a stop in front of my cabin, tires grinding on loose stones. My heart pounded. I had just returned early from my trip, backpack slung over one shoulder, when I heard shouting near the cabin's porch. And there she was, Karen from the HOA. Arms crossed, face twisted in that familiar scowl she always wore when she thought she was in charge of something that wasn't hers. She was talking to the officers like she owned the whole lake. "She broke into this cabin," Karen shouted, pointing at me as if I were some dangerous criminal. "She doesn't belong here. This place has HOA rules, and we're sick of squatters thinking they can just take over." The 2 cops looked at me, then at the cabin, then at her. The younger officer, maybe in his early 30s, spoke first. "Ma'am, we'll handle this. Step aside." I barely had time to open my mouth before Karen snapped again. "No, I want her arrested, right now." My hands shook as I reached into my jacket pocket for my wallet. My driver's license, property deed, everything I needed to prove this was my cabin, was right there. But before I could say a word, the older cop turned toward Karen. His voice was sharp now, cutting through her rant. "Ma'am, unless you have proof she doesn't own this cabin, you need to back off. If this is her property, you have no right to be here." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. I pulled out the paper slowly, my fingers trembling. The cop took one glance at the deed and handed it back. Then he turned fully toward Karen, his hand resting on his duty belt. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "if this is her property, you need to stay off it. Consider this a warning. You don't set foot on this land again without permission." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen's face went pale. And that's when the shouting started from the back of the cabin. Another voice, angry and panicked, coming closer. 3 weeks earlier, things had been quiet. I had left for my trip to the Rockies, a 5-day hiking retreat I'd been looking forward to for months. The cabin was my safe place. My late husband John and I had bought it together 20 years ago, back when the HOA was barely even a thing. It sat on 2 acres by the lake, surrounded by towering pines and the sound of loons at night. Karen, though, she had moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago, and ever since she'd acted like the self-appointed queen of the HOA. She had rules for everything. How short the grass should be, what color mailboxes could be, even how loud the kids could laugh by the lake. But me? I stayed out of her way. I paid my HOA dues, followed the rules when I could, and ignored her when she started one of her infamous rants at the meetings, or at least I used to. Because a month before my trip, things changed. It started when Karen found out I wasn't selling my cabin. Some developer had been eyeing the lakeside properties, offering big money to anyone willing to move out. A few neighbors took the offer. I didn't. "This place is worth a fortune," Karen had told me one morning, standing at the edge of my driveway in her tennis outfit. "You could sell and live in luxury instead of this old thing." I smiled politely. "This old thing is home, not selling." Her smile had been tight, sharp. People who don't cooperate with the HOA usually regret it. At the time, I thought it was just Karen being Karen, dramatic, bossy, full of herself. But now, standing here with police lights flashing and her face white as chalk, I wondered if there had been more to her words than I realized. The days before the trip were peaceful. I spent time with my friend Mike, who lived 2 cabins down. He was a retired firefighter, tall with a big laugh and a habit of checking on me like a protective older brother. "You sure you trust leaving the place empty?" Mike had asked when I told him about my trip. "Yeah," I said. "It's a quiet neighborhood, and I locked everything up." Mike had nodded but frowned. "Just be careful. HOA's been getting pushier lately. Karen was snooping around the Johnsons' old cabin after they sold it." I shrugged it off back then. I had no idea Karen would cause this much trouble. The morning I left for the Rockies was chilly but bright. I packed my hiking gear, double-checked the locks on every door and window, and gave Mike a spare key just in case. "Call me if anything weird happens," I told him. He gave me a little salute. "Go enjoy your mountains. I got this place covered." I had no clue that while I was climbing peaks and sleeping under stars, Karen was plotting something back here. Now here I was, back from my trip, with police cars in my driveway and Karen looking like she'd seen a ghost. The younger officer turned toward the sound of the shouting from behind the cabin. "What's going on back there?" he asked sharply. Karen opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, a man stumbled into view. His face was red, his eyes wild, and in his hands. Well, that's where things took a turn I didn't see coming. Because what he was holding made the older cop reach for his radio instantly. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Before we go on, let me introduce the key people in this story so far. There's me, Emily Harris, owner of the lake cabin my husband and I loved for decades. Karen Thompson, the HOA president who thinks the world belongs to her. Mike Rogers, my loyal neighbor and retired firefighter. And now these 2 police officers, Officer Daniels, the older one with calm eyes, and Officer Perez, the younger one who looked like he ran on black coffee and adrenaline. But who was the man coming out from behind the cabin? And what on earth was he carrying? We'll get to that. But not yet. Because the moment I saw it, I realized this night was only getting started. The man coming from behind my cabin stumbled forward like he was running out of breath. His boots scraped against the gravel as he came closer, his face red with anger. For a moment, nobody moved. The police officers stared, Karen gasped, and I just stood there with my backpack still hanging off one shoulder, my heart thudding hard in my chest. The first thing I noticed about him was his grip. Both of his hands clutched a metal crowbar, the edges rusty, the kind you'd use to pry open locked doors or windows. My stomach sank. The older officer, Daniels, stepped forward quickly, one hand hovering near his holster. "Sir," he said sharply, voice carrying across the cool evening air, "drop the crowbar right now." The man stopped mid-step. His chest heaved and he turned toward Karen like he was waiting for her to explain why the police were here. Karen's face twisted nervously. She looked at him, then back at the cops, then at me. I had no idea who he was. Or at least, not at first. It wasn't until the younger officer, Perez, took a cautious step forward that something clicked in my head. I had seen this man before, a month ago, at the HOA meeting. He was the one Karen always whispered to, the so-called maintenance guy who fixed fences and mowed lawns for the HOA. His name was Rick. I remembered Mike telling me once that Rick had a bit of a temper. "Does whatever Karen tells him," Mike had said with a shake of his head. Like her personal guard dog. Now here he was on my property, with a crowbar in his hands. And suddenly, a dozen questions ran through my head all at once. Had he broken into my cabin while I was gone? Was Karen behind all this? And why did they both look so guilty now that the cops were here? Rick's eyes darted toward Karen again, as if silently asking her what to do. Karen didn't answer. She looked pale, her lips pressed tight together. "Sir," Daniel said again, his voice lower now but firm. "I'm only going to tell you once. Drop the crowbar. Hands where I can see them." For a tense moment, it looked like Rick might argue. His grip on the crowbar tightened. He shifted on his feet like he was deciding whether to fight, run, or obey. Finally, with a loud clank, the crowbar hit the gravel. "Step back," Perez ordered. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Rick slowly raised his hands. His eyes kept darting toward Karen like he was expecting her to defend him. She didn't say a word. While the officers moved to question Rick, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was Mike calling. I answered quickly. "Mike," I said in a low voice, walking a few steps away from the chaos. "You're not going to believe what's happening right now." "Emily?" Mike's voice boomed through the speaker. "You back already?" "Yes," I said. "And Karen called the cops on me. Now there's some guy with a crowbar." "Wait, what?" Mike interrupted. "I'll be right there. Don't let them leave until I get there." The line went dead. I slid my phone back into my pocket, my hands trembling a little. I didn't know if I felt safer with the police here or more nervous about what they were going to find out. Daniels turned back toward me after separating Rick from the group. "Ma'am, you said you own this cabin?" "Yes," I said firmly. "It's been in my family for 20 years. My name's on the deed. I have the paperwork right here." I held out the folder again. He looked through it carefully, nodding. "All right," he said finally. "This confirms it's yours." Karen's mouth fell open like she wanted to argue, but one look from Perez shut her up. "Then why?" Daniels continued, turning back toward Karen and Rick. "Are these two here accusing you of trespassing?" That was the million-dollar question. I crossed my arms and stared at Karen. "Yeah, Karen," I said slowly. "Why are you on my property? And why is your guy here with a crowbar?" Karen stammered for the first time since I'd known her. We thought maybe you weren't coming back," she said finally, her voice shaking slightly. "We were just making sure the place was secure." I raised my eyebrows. "With a crowbar?" Perez snorted quietly but didn't say anything. Before Karen could respond, Mike's old red pickup truck pulled into the driveway, kicking up dust. He climbed out quickly, his broad shoulders filling his flannel shirt, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The police cars, the crowbar. Karen standing there pale and silent. "What in the world is going on here?" Mike demanded. "Good timing," I said. "Karen called the cops on me, and apparently she brought this guy to secure my cabin with a crowbar." Mike's eyes darkened as he looked at Karen. "You just don't quit, do you?" Karen bristled. "We have rules in this neighborhood." "No," Mike snapped, cutting her off. "You have power trips, that's what you have. The officers asked me to walk them through the property so they could check for damage or signs of forced entry. We started with the front door. The lock was scratched, like someone had tried to pry it open. My stomach twisted when I saw it. "Looks recent," Perez said, crouching down to study the marks. Karen shifted uncomfortably on her feet. Rick kept his eyes on the ground. We walked around the cabin, checking each window. 2 of them had chipped paint near the latches like someone had been messing with them. By the time we got back to the porch, my hands were shaking with anger. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice rising. "While I was gone, you tried to break into my cabin, and then you called the cops on me when I came home?" Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "this isn't looking good for you. If she wants to press charges for trespassing or attempted break-in, she can." Karen's eyes widened. "What? No. We were just what?" Mike interrupted sharply. "Just planning to take over her cabin? Just trying to scare her into selling like you did with the Johnsons?" That made Karen's head snap toward him. "Yeah," Mike said coldly, crossing his arms. "I heard all about it. You pushed them until they sold, didn't you? And now you figured Emily was next." Karen didn't answer. "The officers asked me if I wanted to press charges right then." My anger screamed yes. But something in me held back. Not yet. Because I wanted answers first. "Not tonight," I said finally. "But I want them off my property, and I want it on record that they have no right to be here." Daniels nodded. "Understood. We'll file a report. And ma'am," he added to Karen, "if we get another call about you coming here without permission, you might be the one in handcuffs next time." Karen's face went from pale to bright red. After the police left the driveway finally quiet again, I sat on the porch steps with Mike. The sun was dipping low over the lake, turning the water orange and gold. "You all right?" Mike asked softly. I nodded, though my chest still felt tight. "I just don't get it," I said. "Why do they want this cabin so badly?" Mike looked out at the lake. "Money," he said finally. "Always comes down to money. Developers are offering big checks. Karen probably wants you out so the HOA can make some kind of deal." I stared at the water, anger simmering low in my gut. This cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was memories. It was my husband teaching our kids to fish on the dock. It was summers with friends, winters by the fire. Selling it was never an option. But now, I realized, keeping it might come with a fight I didn't ask for. As the evening turned darker, Mike headed home, promising to check in tomorrow. I locked every door and window, double-checked each latch, then sat by the fireplace with a mug of tea I couldn't quite finish. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. "You should have sold when you had the chance." My hands froze around the phone. I didn't recognize the number. I didn't sleep much that night. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Let me properly introduce everyone so far. I'm Emily Harris, the cabin owner who just came back from a trip to find chaos waiting at her doorstep. Karen Thompson, the HOA president who thinks intimidation is leadership. Rick Barnes, the so-called handyman with a crowbar and a guilty look. Mike Rogers, my loyal neighbor and retired firefighter who always has my back. And Officers Daniels and Perez, who warned Karen to stay off my property. For now. But that text message? That was new. And it changed everything. Because tomorrow, I was going to find out who sent it. And I had a feeling things were about to get worse before they got better. The text on my phone glowed like a tiny dark moon in my hands. "You should have sold when you had the chance." I stared so long my eyes began to water. Then, before I could even take a breath, another bubble popped up on the screen from the same unknown number. "This is your last warning." I felt the words settle like ice in my stomach. I stood up from the armchair by the fireplace and scanned the windows. The clock over the mantel ticked loud in the quiet room. The lake outside lay black and still, broken only by the thin silver line of moonlight skimming across the water. The pine trees surrounding the cabin whispered in the night wind, and each whisper made the hairs on my arms stand up. I took a slow breath the way my husband John used to tell me when life got loud, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Still, my fingers trembled when I called Mike. He answered on the first ring. "Emily?" Another text. A threat. I kept my voice low, the way people do when they know someone might be listening even if they can't see anyone. "It says this is my last warning." "I'm coming back," Mike said. I could hear his keys jingling and the thud of his boots. "Don't open the door for anyone but me. Turn on every light you've got." "Okay." I hung up and did exactly that. I moved through the rooms like a lighthouse keeper. Living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom. Click, click, click. Until my cabin glowed warm and bright against the night. It felt like putting a fence of light around myself. I grabbed the little bell John had nailed to the inside of the back door years ago. He put it there as a joke, calling it our old-fashioned alarm system. I ran the string of the bell around the lock so it would jingle if anyone tried to open the door. It made a delicate, nervous sound, like a spoon tapping a teacup. The front porch boards creaked. I froze. My eyes went to the door and my heart thumped into my throat. Before fear could crawl up my neck and shut down my voice, I called out, "Who's there?" "It's me." Mike's voice. He tapped the glass gently with his knuckle and lowered his face to the window so I could see his eyes. "It's safe." I let him in and locked the door behind him. He scanned the room with that careful, slow way firefighters have, like he was seeing where a fire might run before it even starts. He stepped to the window and peered out between the curtains. "Any cars?" "I don't see any," I said. "Just the trees and the lake." Mike slipped his phone from his pocket and snapped pictures of the text on my phone. "We'll give this to the sheriff tomorrow. Keep the number blocked for now, but don't delete anything." "What if they're still out there?" I asked. I hated how small my voice sounded. Then they're going to learn you're not alone, he said. You're never alone out here, Emily. We did a slow walk around inside, checking locks and windows again. Mike spotted something I missed. He crouched under the living room window and touched the sill. Gravel dust, he said, showing me the gray powder smudged on his fingers. Fresh. Someone stood right here. A flutter ran through my chest. Watching? Looks like it. He straightened. You still have that spare motion light John wired over the boathouse? Yes. Tomorrow we'll fix it up and add more. My niece Jenna has a couple of cameras left over from a job. I'll ask her to bring them by first thing in the morning. I nodded and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Thank you. He smiled, soft around the eyes. We look out for each other, you and me, same as always. We sat with the lights on until the clock said it was well past midnight. When I finally crawled into bed, I kept the lamp on and my phone in my palm. I told myself to sleep. I told myself I was safe. I told myself I was strong. But every breeze in the trees sounded like a footstep, and every creak of the old cabin sounded like a whisper. I dozed and woke, until gray light turned the windows to foggy squares, and the loons on the lake began their sad morning song. I made coffee, and the smell of it made the cabin feel normal again. Mike knocked, and when I opened the door, he stood there with 2 Danish pastries in a paper bag and a toolbox in his other hand. Breakfast and bolts, he said, trying for a cheerful grin. I laughed, and it shook the fear loose a little. You're a good friend. Don't make a big deal out of it, he said. I like excuses to use my drill. We ate on the porch steps, feet on the lower plank, steaming mugs between our palms. The lake wore a pale summer blue dress, soft and smooth like nothing bad had ever happened anywhere at all. It always amazed me how peace could sit right next to trouble and pretend they'd never met. When Jenna arrived, she hopped out of her SUV with her hair in a messy bun and a laptop under her arm. Okay, Aunt. She caught herself and smiled at me. Okay, Emily, who is not my aunt but is family. Let's turn your cabin into Fort Knox. Thank you for coming, I said. She set a small case on the porch table. Inside, snug in the foam, were 4 little cameras and a tiny black box no bigger than a paperback book. 2 door cams, 1 driveway cam, and 1 boathouse cam, Jenna said. Cloud storage, motion alerts to your phone. Easy peasy. We spent the morning putting kindness and caution into screws and wires. Jenna explained each step in simple words, never talking down to me. Mike held the ladder and teased her that she was part superhero, part IT wizard. I held the box of screws and followed Jenna's soft instructions. Can you pass me the short Phillips? Thank you. With each click and twist, the cabin felt a little less like a target and a little more like home again. When we were done, Jenna showed me the phone app. I watched my own porch on the screen with a tiny delay. It felt strange to see my world inside a rectangle, like seeing myself in a mirror that didn't quite line up. You'll get a ping if anything moves, Jenna said. You can share access with Mike too. Please, I said, handing my phone to Mike. I'd feel better if we watched together. Jenna packed up, hugged me, and promised to check in that evening. After she left, Mike and I replaced the lock on the back door and rehung John's little bell. It chimed once, bright and hopeful. By noon, the sun sat warm on my shoulders, and the fear from the night had drained away like dew. I baked a batch of oatmeal cookies and put a dozen in a tin for Officers Daniels and Perez, with a note that said, "Thank you for keeping us safe." When I set the tin by the door, I smiled to myself. It felt right to answer fear with small kindness. That was something John and I had always tried to teach our kids. When the world gets hard, you don't get harder. You get kinder and stronger at the same time. I carried another tin down the narrow dirt path to the nearest neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Whitaker. She was a widow like me, with careful hands and a gentle voice that always made me think of Sunday afternoons and library books. She opened her door and saw the cookies and the strain on my face at the same time. "Oh, honey," she said, drawing me inside with a soft tug. "Tell me everything." I told her most of it. The cops, the crowbar, the warning text, the cameras. She listened without interrupting, the way good people do. When I finished, she patted my hand. "You're brave," she said. "And you're not alone. I'll keep my porch light on at night. If you ever need me, you come knock." "Thank you." My voice wobbled. "I don't want to make trouble for anyone." "You won't," she said. "Trouble came on its own. But kindness lives here too." On the way back, I spotted Lucas, the 12-year-old who visited his grandparents 2 cabins down. He was kneeling near the shore, sorting rocks into careful lines by shape and color. He looked up when I stepped off the path. "Hi, Miss Harris," he said, shy but bright. "You came back early." "I did," I said. "Want to help me check the fishing lines later?" His eyes lit. "Really?" "Really." We met near the dock that afternoon with 2 poles, a jar of worms, and 2 root beers from my fridge. Nothing big tugged on the lines, but Lucas didn't seem to mind. He told me about the science project he wanted to do in the fall, something about building a tiny water filter out of gravel and charcoal. I told him John would have loved that kind of project. We sat with our shoes off and our toes in the water. The lake lapped lazy and slow. For a little while, I forgot to be afraid. Late in the day, the HOA email hit my inbox with a bell tap notification. The subject line, Emergency Community Meeting, Attendance Required. The body of the email was short and sharp, like a finger jabbed into a shoulder. We must address ongoing violations and threats to neighborhood harmony. Tonight, 7 p.m., Clubhouse. Signed, President Karen Thompson. I forwarded it to Mike and typed, "You see this?" "Saw it," he replied. "I'm going with you." I changed into a clean blue blouse and brushed my hair back. Before I left, I stood in front of John's old photo on the bookshelf, the one of him on the dock with a fish so tiny he had to hold it close to the camera to make it look big. His grin in that picture was silly and perfect. "All right," I told him softly. "I'm still here. I'm still me." Mike picked me up in his truck. The drive to the clubhouse wound through tall pines and past the handful of homes that hadn't sold to the developer. The clubhouse sat at the bend of the road, a low building with a white-painted porch and a flag that clicked softly at the pole. 20 cars crowded the lot. When we stepped inside, a hush skipped through the room like a pebble skimming water. Karen stood at the front behind a folding table with a folder and a little brass bell like she was a judge. Her mouth was a straight line. Rick sat to her right with his arms crossed and his jaw jutted out, a bandage strip peeking from under his sleeve where the crowbar must have rubbed him raw the night before. 2 board members, Susan and Mark, flanked Karen, their faces careful in that bland way people get when they're trying to look important without taking sides. "We'll begin," Karen said, tapping her bell. She didn't look at me. "There have been escalations on our lake. We need order." I felt Mike's hand briefly on my elbow, steady, warm, then drop away. "First item," Karen went on, "is the matter of unauthorized security installations and non-compliant exterior devices at Lot 14. A little bubble of laughter escaped me before I could stop it. It sounded shocked and small. "Non-compliant devices?" I lifted my hand. "Do you mean my doorbell cameras? The ones I installed because someone tried to break into my cabin with a crowbar?" Murmurs drifted across the chairs. Mark coughed. Susan blinked at her hands. Karen's eyes were twin bits of flint. "All exterior cameras must be approved by the board and must not face shared spaces." "They face my doors and my driveway," I said. "You know, the things that belong to me." A voice from the back called, "We all have cameras, Karen." Heads turned. It was Mr. Patel, a quiet man with a soft smile who jogged most mornings. "You approved mine last year." "That was before we had these disruptions," Karen said. "We must protect everyone's privacy." "How about protecting Emily's safety?" Mike said. "A man with a crowbar at her door is not a privacy issue. It's a criminal issue." Rick shifted in his chair. "I was checking a possible break-in." "At someone else's house?" Mike raised an eyebrow. "With a crowbar?" The room's murmurs grew into a low creak rumble. Karen tapped her bell again. "Enough. We're not here to argue. We're here to vote. The board proposes that Lot 14 receives a violation notice for unapproved devices, and that all non-conforming items be removed within 72 hours to avoid fines." "Fines?" I said. "For trying to stay safe?" Karen refused to meet my eyes. "This board upholds the rules for everyone. Rules keep a community together. Kindness keeps a community together," I said, and I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to live in peace. I've paid my dues. I mow my lawn. I wave to neighbors. I bring cookies to people who help me. This cabin is my home. My husband and I built our life here. I am not a problem to be solved, and I am not a threat." Something softened in the air then, like a screen door opening to a breeze. Susan looked up from her folded hands. Mark fiddled with his pen and stopped. A woman in the second row, her name was Elise, a nurse who worked nights, gave me a small, tight nod. Karen's mouth thinned. She saw the room shifting and pushed forward. "We will vote," she said. "Board members only." The vote took 30 seconds. Susan hesitated and then said, "Abstain." Mark, after a long look at me and then at Karen, said, "No violation at this time." Karen said, "Violation." 2-1, the motion failed. It should have felt like a win, but I knew the look that flashed across Karen's face when Mark said no. It was the look of someone who had decided that if she couldn't use the front door, she'd try a window. After the meeting, people gathered in little knots. A few neighbors touched my arm and said quiet things like, "Hang in there," and "We're with you." One older man in a baseball cap told me he had a spare trail camera I could use by the tree line. I thanked each one. I knew every small kindness mattered the same way every small cut hurt. Both left marks. Both told stories. On the way out, Karen blocked the door with her body. Her voice was low, but her words had sharp corners. "You're making this hard." "You tried to break into my house," I said. "I tried to keep order," she said. "Order isn't something you force with threats," I said. "Order grows when people feel safe." Her eyes flicked to Mike, then back to me. "People won't feel safe if you stir up drama." "I didn't call the cops on myself," I said. and stepped past her into the blue evening light. The truck ride home hummed with cricket song. I rolled the window down and let the night air lift the ends of my hair. When we pulled into my drive, the camera app pinged with a tiny buzz. Motion detected. Boathouse. I checked the feed. A raccoon toddled along the fence, nose lifted, tiny hands curious as a child's. I laughed in relief. Just a little bandit, I told Mike, and he chuckled too. He walked the property line one more time with his flashlight before heading home. Text me if anything pings, he said. I'm 3 minutes away. I will. Back inside, I brewed chamomile tea and sat at the small kitchen table where John and I had once planned summer barbecues and winter puzzles. I called my daughter Madison and told her I was okay. She wanted to drive up from the city, but I told her to wait. I've got Mike, I said, and Mrs. Whitaker, and the cameras, and me. You always have you, she said. That's worth more than you know. When we hung up, I looked around the kitchen at the little signs of life that make a house a home. The grocery list magnet, the jar of marbles John used to use as weights for fishing line, the apron with a coffee stain I never could get out. I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be, even when someone tried to turn me into something small. I decided to make a pot of chicken soup for Mrs. Whitaker tomorrow. I decided to leave a handwritten thank you note in Mr. Patel's mailbox for speaking up at the meeting. I decided to organize a lake cleanup on Saturday and invite everyone, board members included. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength with open hands. The sky outside shifted from deep blue to ink. Somewhere across the lake, a dog barked once and was quiet. I rinsed my mug, checked the door locks, and turned off all the lights except the little lamp by the couch. I set my phone on the coffee table beside the remote and reached for my old paperback, wanting to tuck my mind into somebody else's story for a while. The camera app buzzed again. Motion detected. Driveway. I set the book down. My heart didn't hammer this time. It stepped forward, ready. I opened the app. The driveway camera showed blacktop and dust and the edge of my porch rail. Nothing at first, then a quick blur at the far edge of the frame. A shape. A shoulder. A sleeve. It slipped past the camera's furthest angle and out of view. I stood up, slow and careful, and moved to the window beside the door, lifting the curtain with 2 fingers. The porch was empty. The yard was a soft gray lump in the dark. The lake was a smooth piece of coal glass. The bell on the back door twitched once and was still. Mike. I whispered into my phone, but I didn't hit call yet. I didn't want to cry wolf for a raccoon or a fox. I took a breath. Another. The old floorboard under the window made a faint settling sound. I told myself it was just wood remembering its shape after a warm day. I put my hand on the doorknob to check the lock. The metal felt cool and steady. I told myself I was cool and steady too. I turned away, took 1 step. Glass exploded behind me. Something shot through the front window with a crash that lit the room with glittering shards. I flinched, ducked, covered my head the way Mike had taught me. A rock, fist-sized mean, rolled to a stop by the leg of the coffee table. A rubber band held a folded piece of paper to it. My ears rang. I tasted chalk and dust. The lamp by the couch flickered. In the motion sensor's tiny chime from my phone, ding, 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 every camera woke at once. I crawled under the window frame and snatched the rock. The paper was cheap and rough, ripped from a notebook. I peeled it off with shaking fingers and opened it. 4 block letters glared up at me, thick and dark with marker. Out. My breath went short. The porch boards creaked. Footsteps, fast, fleeing. I lunged for the door and threw it open in time to see a shadow break from the edge of the porch and run for the trees. A second shape peeled away from the boathouse, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw the white flash of Karen's tennis shoes. No, not sure, not certain, a trick of moonlight, but then the night swallowed them both. I heard a soft spraying hiss. The smell hit me a second later, chemical and sharp. I spun toward the boathouse and felt my mouth go dry. On the side facing the water, someone had spray-painted a single word in dripping red letters. Even from here I could read it. Sell. My phone buzzed in my palm. The camera feeds lit like a wall of windows. Driveway shapes, boathouse shadows, tree line flickers, and in the middle of it the smallest motion of all, the string on John's bell at the back door shivering once then still. I hit call. Mike, I said, voice taut. They were here. My window. I'm on my way, he said. I stepped backward into the cabin, keeping my eyes on the yard. My heel hit the rock I'd set on the rug. The note lay beside it with its hard little word. Out. Another text blinked onto my phone from the same unknown number as last night. Just 3 words this time. Plain and cold. Last. Chance. Now. Mike's truck tore into the driveway before the last echo of the thrown rock had faded from my ears. The headlights washed the trees in blinding white beams, cutting across the cabin's front wall where the shattered window gaped like an open wound. He didn't even kill the engine before he jumped out. Boots hitting gravel hard, flashlight already in his hand. Emily, he shouted. I'm fine. My voice trembled even though I tried to steady it. They ran toward the trees. 2 of them. Mike swung the flashlight toward the boathouse, stopping when the red paint glared back at us in dripping letters. Cell. His jaw tightened. Stay here, he said, voice sharp now. He grabbed the small axe he kept behind the seat of his truck and jogged toward the edge of the yard. The beam of his light swung with him, cutting between the trees like a sword. I stayed on the porch, phone clutched so tight it hurt. The cameras sent alerts one after another, soft dings piling up like nervous heartbeats. Every angle caught only slices, shadows disappearing into black woods, branches shaking in the wake of someone running fast. Gone, Mike muttered when he came back, breath quick. Too dark, too fast. I wrapped my arms around myself. They're not stopping, Mike. First the crowbar, now this. It's not random. I know, he said, and it ends tonight. Call Daniels. Now. I did. The dispatcher promised to send a unit immediately. While we waited, Mike pushed furniture away from the broken window so nobody could reach inside. He picked up the rock and studied the note again, face grim. Same handwriting? He asked. I compared it to the text photo on my phone. Looks like it. Block letters, like they want to sound angry but calm. Or trying too hard to scare you, he said. The police cars arrived in under 10 minutes. Daniels stepped out first, his flashlight sweeping across the porch, the window, the note, the painted word on the boathouse. Perez followed with a camera to photograph everything. Ma'am, Daniel said, voice steady but lower than before. You all right? I nodded, though my heart still hadn't slowed down. Mike filled him in, his words clipped. 2 of them ran east through the trees, too dark to see faces. Window shattered, property damage, threatening note. Perez knelt by the rock, snapped pictures, bagged it carefully. We'll dust it at the station, he said. Daniels turned to me. You get a look at either one? Maybe, I said slowly. One of them could have been Karen. Or maybe it was the shoes, I don't know. Mike muttered something under his breath I didn't catch. Daniel sighed. We'll increase patrols tonight, and if you think of any names, you let me know. I already have one, I said before I could stop myself. Rick. Mike gave a short, hard nod. After the officers left, Mike and I sat at the kitchen table with the broken window covered by cardboard. The lamp threw tired yellow light across the wood grain. The note without lay between us like a third person. This isn't just about money anymore, Mike said finally. This is pressure, fear tactics. Somebody thinks if they make you miserable enough, you'll give in. I shook my head. They don't understand. This cabin. It's John. It's my kids learning to swim. It's every Christmas we ever had when we couldn't afford trips anywhere else. Selling it would be like erasing us. Mike's eyes softened. Then we fight smart. Cameras, locks, neighbors watching, and tomorrow we go straight to the sheriff. I looked at him. Do you think Karen's behind all of it? The break-in, the threats, this? He leaned back, arms crossed. If she isn't, she knows who is. HOA presidents like her don't like mess unless they started it. I let out a shaky laugh. That's true. Morning came slow, the kind where sunlight feels heavy instead of bright. I swept glass from the floor while Mike boarded the window properly. Mrs. Whitaker brought over muffins on a paper plate and shook her head sadly at the red paint on the boathouse. Shameful, she said softly. Some people forget what kindness looks like. Not all people, I told her, patting her hand. You didn't? She smiled faintly. You call if you need anything, day or night. Jenna came after breakfast to adjust the camera angle so the woods showed clearer. She frowned at the paint, the rock, the boarded window. I can set up alerts for any motion after dark, she said. Phone pings, loud siren if you want it. Yes, I said quickly. Do it. While she worked, Mike walked the property line again. He found footprints by the boathouse, 2 sets, one larger, one smaller, leading toward the east woods before disappearing into pine needles. Perez stopped by around noon with copies of the report. Sheriff wants to see everything, he said. Texts, notes, photos. Might tie to other complaints. Other complaints? Mike asked sharply. Perez nodded. Couple cabins west side reported trespassing last month. No damage, just people snooping at night. I exchanged a glance with Mike. Developers again? I asked. Could be, Perez said. Could be kids. Could be your HOA folks pushing too far. We'll know more soon. That evening, the HOA sent another email. Special board session tomorrow. Mandatory attendance for all residents. Mike read it over my shoulder. They're circling wagons, he muttered. I rubbed my forehead. Do you think they'll admit anything? He snorted. Bullies don't confess, they double down. Night fell like a held breath. Mike insisted on staying over in the guest room. Not leaving you alone here, he said simply, carrying his duffel inside. We sat on the porch with the camera's infrared glow painting faint halos across the yard. The lake was quiet except for the plop of a fish somewhere far out and the low hoot of an owl. John would have hated this, I said softly. Mike nodded. He liked peace. He liked people getting along. I smiled faintly. He used to say fences should keep animals out, not neighbors. We fell silent then, listening to the wind slip through pine needles. The cardboard over the window flapped once, twice, like a tired flag. The first sound came just after midnight, a crack, faint but sharp, from the woods to the east. Mike was on his feet instantly, flashlight in one hand, axe in the other. I grabbed my phone, heart climbing into my throat. Another crack. Closer this time, like a branch snapping under weight. The camera alerts went off. Ding, ding, ding. Front yard, driveway, boathouse all at once. Shadows moved fast at the edge of the woods. Inside, Mike ordered, but I was already backing toward the door. One shadow broke from the trees and ran full tilt toward the boathouse. Another darted along the fence line toward the cabin itself. Mike threw on the floodlights. White glare washed the yard. Two figures froze mid-run, faces masked with cheap fabric pulled high over their noses. One bolted toward the lake. The other lunged straight for the cabin porch, straight for me. The floodlights blasted across the yard, turning night into harsh white day. The masked man sprinting toward the porch didn't slow. His boots hammered the gravel, shoulders hunched, gloved hands clenched. My heart banged so hard I couldn't tell if it was mine or the cabin shaking. "Inside, Emily!" Mike shouted. I stumbled backward through the doorframe as Mike swung the axe handle like a baseball bat. The man hit the steps at full speed, and Mike met him halfway with a crack of wood against shoulder. The intruder grunted, staggered sideways, then bolted along the porch rail instead of up the steps. The second figure tore across the yard toward the lake, feet scattering gravel like marbles. The cameras lit the yard in choppy, blinking angles. Driveway, boathouse, porch, each one showing pieces but never the whole. "Stay inside," Mike barked, chasing the first man toward the corner of the cabin. I slammed the door, locked it, grabbed my phone. "Sheriff's office," the dispatcher answered before the first ring ended. "Two intruders." My voice shook. "One ran toward the lake, one's here by the cabin. We need help now." "Units en route," she said. Outside, Mike shouted, "Stop! Sheriff on the way!" A crash answered him, wood splintering. The second man had kicked in the boathouse door on his way past. Floodlights caught them both for a moment before they vanished into the tree line beyond the dock. The yard fell still again except for Mike's rough breathing and the soft whine of the wind through the broken boathouse door. I unlocked the door when Mike jogged back, face red, jaw tight. "You okay?" I nodded, though my knees wobbled. They didn't get in." "Not for lack of trying," he said grimly. Police cars filled the drive 10 minutes later. Daniel stepped out first, hand on his belt, eyes scanning the yard like he was memorizing it. Perez followed with two more deputies carrying flashlights and cameras. "They ran east?" Daniels asked Mike. "Fast," Mike said. "One headed for the lake, one for the woods. Masked, couldn't see faces." Perez photographed the boot prints in the gravel. Another deputy measured the broken boathouse door with a little metal ruler. Daniels studied the porch rail where the axe handle had hit. "Lucky you didn't drop him right here," he muttered. "Wasn't aiming to kill," Mike said. "Just stop." I stood on the porch holding the rock from earlier like it might explain something if I gripped it hard enough. Daniels noticed. "That from tonight?" "No," I said. "Last night. Same people, maybe." Daniels crouched, studying the handwriting on the old note. "You recognize it?" I shook my head. "Block letters. Could be anybody." "Could be Karen?" Mike said flatly. Daniel's eyes flicked up. "You got proof?" "Not yet," Mike said, "but give us time." The deputies spread across the property with flashlights, following footprints until they disappeared into pine needles by the east fence. Perez studied the boathouse wall where cell still dripped red like a fresh wound. "Same spray paint used on two cabins west side last week," he said. "We'll match the samples." I wrapped my arms tighter around myself. "So it's happening to others too?" "Looks like it," he said. Daniel straightened. "Ma'am, we'll patrol heavy tonight. Tomorrow you come to the station, sign trespass orders for anyone you suspect. That way if they step foot here again we can take them in." "Good," Mike said before I could answer. By the time the police left, the sky toward the east had paled just enough to show shapes instead of shadows. Mike patched the boathouse door with plywood while I swept glass from the porch steps again. "This is only getting worse," I said quietly. He nodded. "People like this push until somebody pushes back harder." I thought about John then, about how he used to handle problems with calm words first but never let anyone mistake kindness for weakness. He'd have called the sheriff too. He'd have kept the cabin safe no matter what. I straightened my shoulders. "We're not leaving." Mike looked at me, face lit by the pale early light. "Good," he said. At noon, Jenna arrived with more cameras, extra floodlights, and a motion-triggered siren that could wake the dead. "Now they'll glow on video from 6 angles," she said, setting her laptop on the porch rail. "And if they come back, this thing screams like a tornado warning." Mrs. Whitaker brought soup this time, shaking her head sadly at the boarded window. "My Harold would have run them off with his old shotgun," she said softly. "Not yet," Mike said. "Let's keep this legal." That evening, the HOA held its special session at the clubhouse. Mike drove me there, arms crossed tight over the steering wheel. Inside, Karen sat at the same table with the same brass bell like nothing had happened. Rick leaned against the wall near the coffee urn, arms crossed, eyes hard. Karen cleared her throat. "We've had unfortunate incidents lately," she said smoothly. "Vandalism, noise, police visits. This board believes certain homeowners are escalating matters." She didn't look at me when she said it. I stood anyway. "Someone threw a rock through my window," I said. "Painted threats on my boathouse, broke my door. That's not escalation, that's criminal." Murmurs rippled through the chairs. Karen lifted her chin. "The board urges all residents to remain calm and consider whether recent actions are disrupting community harmony." "Community harmony?" Mike snapped. "How about community safety?" Rick straightened from the wall. "Maybe people wouldn't be so riled if certain cabins didn't bring trouble." My hands curled into fists at my sides. This cabin brought Christmas dinners, fishing weekends, church bake sales, and barbecues. Trouble showed up when someone decided it was worth money more than memories. Karen banged the bell. "Order," she said sharply. But the room didn't quiet like before. People shifted in their seats, glancing at each other, murmuring. Elise the nurse spoke up from the second row. "Emily's right. We didn't have vandalism until folks started selling to that developer." Mark, one of the board members, rubbed his forehead. "Maybe we should postpone votes until the sheriff finishes his investigation." Karen's eyes flashed, but she smiled thinly. "Very well. We'll revisit next week." On the way out, someone had slipped a folded paper under my windshield wiper. Mike spotted it first, yanking it free with 2 fingers like it might bite. 4 letters again, thick and black. Soon. He crumpled it in his fist. "They want fear? We'll give them handcuffs instead." We drove home under a sky bruised purple by sunset. The cabin lights glowed warm across the yard, cameras blinking red dots like watchful eyes. I set the new note beside the first 2 on the kitchen table. Out. Last chance. Soon. The words lined up like footsteps coming closer. I didn't sleep that night. Even after Mike checked every lock twice, after Jenna's cameras lit the yard with infrared halos, after Mrs. Whitaker called to say she was keeping her porch light on just in case, I lay awake, listening to every creak of the cabin like it was Morse code from the dark. Soon. The note on my windshield glared up from the kitchen table. Beside it sat the first 2. Out. Last chance. 3 words that had turned my quiet lake cabin into a chessboard, where I didn't know all the players yet. Mike stayed in the guest room again. I heard him pacing once around midnight, floorboards groaning under his boots. When he finally settled, the cabin went still. The cameras sent a few motion alerts. Raccoon by the boathouse, owl swooping over the yard, wind stirring the pine branches, but no people, no footsteps, no shadows running where they shouldn't. By morning, the silence felt like the pause before a slammed door. At breakfast, Mike pushed his coffee aside. "Sheriff's expecting us at 10, he said. "We give him everything, text, notes, camera footage." I nodded, sliding the folder of evidence across the table. "You think they'll arrest someone?" "If they've got sense, yes," he said. "If they've got proof, sooner." The drive to the sheriff's office wound through sunlight spilling over pine needles like gold dust. It felt wrong, almost, that the world could look so pretty while someone was plotting ugly things behind it. Sheriff Larkin met us himself, a tall man with silver hair and tired eyes. He shook my hand gently, then Mike's firmly, and led us into a small room with a rectangular table and walls the color of wet cardboard. Perez was already there with a laptop open. The 3 notes lay on the table like witnesses waiting to speak. "Tell me everything," Larkin said. So we did. The break-in attempts, the masked intruders, the rock through the window, the spray paint, the HOA meetings, the threats slipped under windshield wipers. When we finished, Larkin leaned back slowly. "You suspect Karen Thompson?" "Yes," I said. "And Rick Barnes. He was here with a crowbar the first night." Larkin nodded like he'd expected those names. "We've had complaints about that HOA before," he said. "Mostly small stuff, fines, arguments, but nothing like this." "Until the developer came around," Mike added. Larkin's eyes flicked toward him. "Developer?" I explained about the company offering big money for lake properties, how some neighbors sold quick while others, like me, refused. How Karen had hinted more than once that I should take the deal. Larkin rubbed his chin. "Money makes people stupid," he said finally, "and dangerous." Perez turned the laptop toward us. The camera footage from 2 nights ago played, grainy shapes under floodlights, masked faces blurred by motion. Then the boathouse wall dripping red letters. Sell. "We'll match the paint," Perez said, "and run handwriting on the notes. No promises, but it's something." On the way home, Mike drove slower than usual. "You notice Larkin didn't seem surprised?" I nodded. "Like he's been waiting for this." "Or like he knows it's bigger than just you," Mike said. Mrs. Whitaker met us at the driveway with a basket of biscuits wrapped in a towel. "Saw 2 strange trucks on the main road this morning," she said softly. "Not from around here." "Developers?" Mike asked. She shrugged. "Or trouble?" I carried the basket inside, set it on the counter, and stared at the notes again. Out. Last chance. Soon. They looked back like eyes. That afternoon, Jenna added 2 more cameras facing the east woods. No blind spots now, she said. If they sneeze out there, you'll see it. Mike stacked firewood near the porch in neat rows, movements sharp. Like order itself could keep chaos away. I baked a pie for Mrs. Whitaker because kindness still mattered. It had to. At sunset, a truck I didn't recognize slowed near the end of my drive. My stomach pinched until it passed without stopping. Mike watched it go, jaw tight. They're circling, he muttered. Night came heavy. Mike sat on the porch with the axe handle across his knees while I watched the cameras from inside. The floodlights carved the yard into bright pieces surrounded by dark edges. Around 11, a motion alert pinged. Eastwoods. Mike tensed. Where? I pointed at the screen. A figure stood just beyond the fence line, half hidden by trees. Too far for details. Just standing. Watching. Mike grabbed the flashlight. Call Larkin. I dialed. The dispatcher promised a unit right away. When the floodlight swung toward the woods, the figure stepped back slowly, like melting into the dark. Mike muttered a curse under his breath. The police arrived 10 minutes later, searched the trees, found nothing but footprints leading east toward the main road. At midnight, another motion alert pinged. This time, not the woods, the boathouse. I pulled up the feed and froze. Someone was inside. A flashlight beam skimmed across the window, catching for 1 second on a face. Unmasked. Rick Barnes. Mike grabbed the axe handle and the phone at the same time. Sheriff now, he snapped. We ran to the porch as Rick stumbled out of the boathouse carrying a gas can. Hey, Mike shouted, charging down the steps. Rick froze like a deer in headlights, then bolted toward the trees, dropping the can with a metallic clatter. Mike chased him halfway to the fence before 2 police cars screamed into the drive, lights washing the yard red and blue. Officers tackled Rick just beyond the mailbox. The gas can lay on its side, reeking of gasoline, dark stains spreading through the gravel. Daniels snapped cuffs on his wrists while Perez read rights in a hard, flat voice. They put Rick in the back of the car. Larkin arrived minutes later, face like stone. Arson, he said after hearing the story. That's prison time. I stood on the porch, shaking while officers photographed everything. The gas can, the footprints, the boathouse door forced open again. Mike kept a hand near my shoulder like he was holding me up without touching me. Larkin came over finally. He talk yet? Mike asked. Not much, Larkin said, but he will. As they drove Rick away, the night felt quieter than it had in days, but not safe, because Rick didn't plan this alone. And we all knew who was next on the list. The red and blue lights from the squad cars disappeared down the road, leaving the night darker than it had been before they came. The gasoline smell still clung to the air near the boathouse, sharp and bitter. I stood there for a long time staring at the dark stains spreading across the gravel where the gas can had fallen. Mike set the axe handle down on the porch rail, jaw tight. He wasn't acting alone, he said finally, voice low but hard. Somebody sent him here. We didn't have to say the name out loud. Karen. Every instinct in me screamed it. Rick never made decisions without her. At the HOA meetings, he sat 2 steps behind her, always ready to nod or scowl or threaten when she wanted him to. He didn't spray sell on my boathouse because he cared about property values. He didn't throw rocks through my window because he wanted me gone. He did it because someone told him to, and that someone thought they were untouchable. Mike must have been reading my mind. Tomorrow, he said, we're going to the sheriff again, with everything. I nodded slowly, my eyes still locked on the boathouse door. It hung crooked on one hinge now, like a broken jaw. The cameras caught every second tonight, but I wanted more than evidence. I wanted the truth laid bare where even Karen couldn't twist it into something else. Sheriff Larkin called early the next morning. Rick wasn't talking yet, but the sheriff's tone carried a weight that told me he expected he would. People like him don't hold out long, Larkin said, especially when the charges get explained real clear. What about Karen? I asked. There was a pause. Let's see what Rick says first. I hung up feeling like the air in the cabin was too thick to breathe. Mike spent the morning replacing the boathouse door with a heavier one from the hardware store. Jenna installed a new camera directly above it, angled so sharp it could read the date off a dime. Mrs. Whitaker brought over lemonade and stood watching while Mike worked. You think they'll charge her too? She asked softly. I think, Mike said, hammer pausing mid-swing, that bullies eventually slip in their own mess. By afternoon, the lake looked too calm for the tension crawling through the neighborhood. Kids splashed near the public dock like nothing was wrong. Someone grilled burgers 2 cabins down, the smell drifting warm and ordinary through the pines. But every car that passed made me stiffen. Every creak of the porch boards made me glance at the cameras. Mike noticed. You need a break, he said finally. Let's take the canoe out before sunset, just 1 hour. No phones, no cameras, no Karen. I hesitated. The thought of leaving the cabin even for an hour felt like stepping away from a campfire with wolves just beyond the light. But the lake had always been my refuge, John used to say water carried your fears away if you let it. All right, I said quietly. We paddled out as the sun dipped low, painting the water copper and gold. The cabin shrank behind us, lights glowing warm against the dark pines. For the first time in days, I breathed without feeling like the air was made of glass. Mike didn't talk much. He let the paddle slice through the water in steady rhythms, while loons called somewhere across the lake. The surface rippled like silk around the canoe. This place deserves peace, I said finally. It'll have it, Mike said. One way or another. We beached the canoe just as the first stars pricked through the sky. The cameras blinked red dots from the porch roof, steady and watchful. I made tea while Mike locked the boathouse door behind us. For a little while, things almost felt normal again. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You think jail stops this? You have no idea what's coming. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the counter. Mike read it over my shoulder. His mouth went hard. So it wasn't just Rick. 10 minutes later, headlights swung into my driveway. Not police this time. A black SUV I didn't recognize. Mike was on the porch before the engine even stopped. Flashlight in one hand, other hand near the axe handle leaning against the rail. The driver's door opened. Karen climbed out. She wore a white tennis sweater like always, hair perfect, lips pressed thin. But her eyes flicked toward the cameras before settling on me standing in the doorway. Emily, she said smoothly, like we were neighbors discussing garden weeds instead of threats and gasoline. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, arms folded. I heard Rick got himself arrested. Shame. Shame he didn't burn my cabin down first. My voice cracked like dry wood. Something sharp flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. Nobody wants things to get ugly, she said. You could still end this. Take the offer. Sell. Move somewhere. Calmer. Mike laughed once, low and cold. You're bold showing up here tonight. Karen's eyes slid to him. I came to talk sense before more mistakes happen. Like breaking and entering? Mike said. Like arson? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Like refusing to let go when it's time. I stepped onto the porch finally. This cabin isn't for sale. Karen sighed like a teacher disappointed in a slow student. Then you can't blame me for what comes next. She turned, heels clicking against the gravel, and slid back into the SUV. The taillights vanished down the road, leaving the night thick and buzzing with crickets. Mike exhaled slowly. She just threatened you on camera. I glanced at the red light blinking above the porch, every word recorded. We sent the footage to Sheriff Larkin before midnight. He texted back, got it, don't go anywhere tomorrow. Things are moving fast. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but for the first time since this started, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the law was finally catching up to Karen Thompson. But at 2 a.m. the cameras woke us again. Motion alert, driveway, another, back fence. Then another, boathouse, 3 at once. Mike grabbed the flashlight, I grabbed the phone. Figures moved through the yard, fast and low. Too many this time for just Karen. Too many for just threats. The first figure reached the edge of the porch before the floodlights snapped on. White glare exploded across the yard, blinding them mid-step. 3 of them, maybe 4, stopped for half a heartbeat, faces masked, dark clothes clinging to their shoulders. Mike was already off the porch with the axe handle, yelling for me to call 911. My fingers shook as I hit the button, breath tight against my ribs. They're here, I told the dispatcher. 4 of them, masks, my cabin. Units en route, she said, voice sharp now. The men split fast, one toward the boathouse, one circling left toward the back door. 2 charging straight for Mike like they thought they could run him over. The siren Jenna installed screamed to life, a sound like every tornado in the world tearing through the pines. The men flinched but didn't stop. Mike swung the axe handle like thunder cracking through the night. One man went down in the gravel with a grunt, rolled, scrambled up, then bolted toward the trees instead of trying again. The second swung something shiny, a metal pipe maybe, catching the edge of Mike's shoulder before he drove him back with another hit from the axe handle. The one at the back door started kicking hard enough to rattle the hinges. And the one at the boathouse? Gasoline. Again? Mrs. Whitaker came in her robe carrying a flashlight and a jar of something steaming. Chamomile, she said, pressing it into my hands. For shock. Her eyes flicked toward the yard where police lights still pulsed. World's lost its mind. Or just my corner of it, I said. Perez came in a few minutes later with his notebook. One of the men's talking, he said. Wants a deal. Mike stepped inside behind him, face sharp now. Karen? He asked. Perez nodded slowly. Says she paid them. The words dropped into the room like rocks through glass. Mrs. Whitaker whispered a prayer under her breath. I gripped the edge of the table. Paid them for what? Perez met my eyes. To scare you off the property. Make it look like local punk so the HOA stayed clean. Larkin came in next, hat in one hand, anger written across every line of his face. We've got enough, he said. She's done. He didn't have to say the name. We all knew. The deputies loaded the men into the squad cars. 2 more came back empty-handed from the woods, shaking their heads. Others got away. For now. Larkin looked at me. We'll pick them up. Tonight if we can. I nodded slowly, staring past him toward the cabin walls, the porch, the boathouse. All the places someone tried to erase my life like chalk on a sidewalk. Mike didn't speak until the last car left. Then he sat at the table across from me, big hands folded tight. "She's going to jail," he said finally. But the way he said it carried something heavier, like he knew this wasn't over yet. Sheriff Larkin didn't wait until morning. The last police car had barely rolled away from my driveway when his radio crackled with confirmation from the county judge. A warrant. Karen Thompson's name written clear as day. "Stay put tonight," Larkin told me before heading for his cruiser. "We're about to bring your HOA queen in." Mike stood with his arms folded, watching the taillights disappear. "About time," he muttered. I wanted to feel relief. I really did. But my hands still shook from the smell of gasoline clinging to the boathouse door, from the memory of masked faces in the floodlights. Karen paying those men meant this wasn't about rules or property values anymore. It was hate now. It was personal. The arrest happened just after dawn. Jenna texted me the news first, 3 words glowing on my screen. They got her. An hour later, Perez stopped by with details. Karen had answered the door in her white tennis sweater like it was any other morning, like deputies on her porch were there for coffee instead of handcuffs. She didn't say much, Perez told us at my kitchen table. Lawyered up fast, but we've got bank records tying her to the men we caught last night, payments labeled as maintenance work. Mike snorted. Guess arson counts as maintenance now. Perez managed a tired smile. She won't talk, but one of the men will. He's already cutting a deal for less time. Word spread through the neighborhood before noon. Mrs. Whitaker came over carrying cinnamon rolls on a tray, eyes bright behind her glasses. "Half the lake's talking," she said. "People are angry, Emily. Real angry. About the threats. About the fires. About her." I believed it. Karen had ruled the HOA for years with fines and threats dressed up as regulations. Maybe people followed her because it was easier than fighting. Maybe fear looked like respect if you squinted hard enough. But now the fear was broken. Mike replaced the last boarded window while I swept glass off the porch one final time. The cameras blinked red across the yard, recording everything just in case. "You think she'll sell her house after this?" I asked him. He tightened the last screw with one hard twist. "She won't have a choice if she's behind bars." I wanted to believe that. By evening, the lake felt quieter than it had in weeks. "Not tonight," he said. Mike stayed outside talking to deputies while I sat at the kitchen table with the window open so I could hear the night. The air smelled like gasoline and pine needles crushed under boots. Kids rode bikes along the gravel road again. Someone grilled hot dogs near the public dock. Even the birds seemed louder, like the whole place had been holding its breath waiting for Karen Thompson to fall. But peace still felt thin, like ice over deep water, because 2 of the masked men were still out there. Sheriff Larkin called after dinner. "We found one of the runners," he said. "He's talking too. Says Karen promised them a cut if the property sold after you left." I gripped the phone tighter. "So it was always about money." "And control," Larkin said. "People like her don't like losing either one." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept with the windows open. The air smelled like pine instead of fear. Mike stayed in the guest room anyway just in case, but nothing stirred the cameras except a deer nosing along the fence line. Morning brought sunlight through clean windows, the lake glittering like it hadn't seen red paint or broken glass. Mrs. Whitaker joined me on the porch with coffee. "You keeping the cabin?" she asked. I laughed softly. "They could burn the whole world down and I'd still keep it." She nodded like she already knew that answer. Perez stopped by late morning with paperwork for trespass orders against anyone tied to Karen. "This keeps them off your land even after trial," he said. I signed every page. At noon, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, this time without Karen at the front table. Mark, usually quiet, ran it instead. He cleared his throat, looking around the clubhouse at faces lined with gossip and worry. "Effective immediately," he said. "Karen Thompson is removed as HOA president. Unanimous vote from the remaining board." A ripple of murmurs swept the room. "We'll cooperate fully with law enforcement," Mark continued. "And moving forward, this HOA will focus on safety, not harassment." Someone in the back muttered, "About time." I didn't speak. I just sat there feeling the weight of weeks slowly lift, piece by piece, like bricks pulled off my shoulders. That evening, Mike and I walked the property line one more time. The boathouse door stood solid. The floodlights glared bright. The cameras blinked red, steady and calm. "You keeping the cameras?" Mike asked. I smiled faintly. "For now. Maybe forever." He nodded toward the lake where the sunset burned orange across the water. "John would be glad you stayed." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, he would. The trial date came fast. Maybe too fast for Karen Thompson, who had always strutted through HOA meetings like a queen holding court. Now she wore a county jumpsuit the color of wet clay and sat behind a defense table stacked with folders and a lawyer who kept whispering in her ear. I sat in the second row behind the prosecutor's table, Mike on one side, Mrs. Whitaker on the other. Sheriff Larkin nodded at me when he walked in, carrying the gas can as evidence. Even from here, the faint smell of gasoline seemed to hang around it like a memory that wouldn't wash off. Jenna sat behind us with her laptop, ready to show the jury every second her cameras had caught. The rock through my window, the spray paint dripping red, the masked men sprinting across my yard, Rick in handcuffs with gasoline staining his boots. Karen didn't look at me when they brought her in. She kept her chin high, but her eyes darted everywhere, except where I sat. The prosecutor laid it out simple. Karen Thompson paid 4 men, including Rick Barnes, to scare me off my own property. When vandalism didn't work, she told them to burn my cabin, so I'd have no choice but to sell. Bank transfers tied her to the payments. I saw the can glint in the floodlight just as he started splashing the doorframe. Stop! My voice cracked raw, words flying out before I thought. You'll go to prison! They didn't even look at me. Headlights tore down the road then, 2 police cars sliding to a stop with sirens shredding the air. The men scattered like spooked deer. One dove through the fence, another into the trees, 2 sprinting hard for the main road. Mike chased the one with the gas can halfway to the fence before deputies swarmed him from the other side, tackling him into the dirt. The can rolled free, spilling sharp fumes into the night. Daniels cuffed him while Perez and another deputy went after the others, disappearing through the woods. I stayed on the porch gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. By the time the yard fell still again, 2 men sat cuffed near the police cars. The other 2 were gone, swallowed by dark trees, deputies crashing after them with flashlights slicing through branches. Sheriff Larkin arrived 20 minutes later, face like thunder. He took one look at the gas can, the boathouse door, the men on the ground, and his jaw clenched hard enough to show bone. Names, he snapped at Daniels. One deputy shook his head. No IDs yet. They talk? Not yet. Larkin's eyes slid toward me then, softer for a moment. You all right? I nodded even though my knees still wobbled. They were going to burn it, I said, voice low. Text messages from one of the arrested men spelled it out clear. She says, make it look random. Just get her out. And the video? Jenna's cameras showed everything except the thoughts inside Karen's head. The jury didn't need her thoughts. They saw enough in her actions. Rick testified in an orange jumpsuit 2 shades brighter than Karen's. He admitted to the break-ins, the spray paint, the gasoline. He told them Karen promised him $5,000 when I sold the cabin. She said the developer would pay more if nobody got hurt. Rick mumbled, eyes on the floor. Just scare her. Then burn it if we had to. The courtroom went so quiet I heard the air conditioner click on. Karen's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding. Said she only wanted me to move for my own safety after the first break-in, like that made sense. Said she didn't know Rick would go that far, even though the texts showed she paid him after each incident. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did the judge. Verdict came after 3 hours. Guilty on conspiracy, arson attempt, harassment, trespassing, and half a dozen other charges I couldn't even list fast enough. Sentencing set for next month. Karen finally looked at me then, just once, when the deputies let her out. Not angry, not smug, just small, like someone who realized too late the crown she wore was made of paper. Life on the lake changed after that. The developer stopped calling when the sheriff started asking questions about permits and promises. Neighbors who had kept quiet before came by with pies and casseroles and apologies. We didn't know it was that bad, Emily. The HOA elected Mark as the new president. First thing he did was erase half the silly rules Karen had pushed through over the years. Paint colors, lawn heights, mailbox shapes. Back to common sense, Mark said at the first meeting, and kindness. Mike built me a new dock after the old one cracked under winter ice. Mrs. Whitaker brought sweet tea and lemon bars while he hammered the board straight. Jenna set up one last camera on the far post, facing the water instead of the house. Just in case, she said with a smile. Sometimes at night I sit on that dock with my feet in the water, the cabin lights glowing behind me, the cameras blinking their quiet red eyes across the yard. The lake holds everything it saw. Fire almost started, fear almost winning, and gives back peace anyway. Mike joins me sometimes with coffee. We don't talk much about Karen or the trial or the men still serving time because of her. We talk about the fish biting near the East Cove, or whether the loons will nest again this year, or how the sunset turns the water into gold when the day's been hard but it ends soft anyway. I keep the cabin. Of course I keep the cabin. It holds John's laughter, my children's summers. Every storm survived before this one, and now this too. They wanted to scare me off my own land. Instead, they taught me how deep roots can go when you refuse to be moved. The lake is quiet tonight. The windows are whole. The boathouse smells like cedar again instead of gasoline. And for the first time in a long time, I sleep with the lights off. Spring came early that year. The lake thawed in March instead of April, sending sheets of ice drifting like cracked glass down toward the dam. My cabin stood through it all, windows solid, doors locked, cameras blinking patiently from the eaves like quiet guards. Karen Thompson's trial still made the local paper once in a while, mostly when her lawyer filed some new appeal that never went anywhere. She stayed in county while the judge decided how many years she'd serve. But life around the lake? It started knitting itself back together like a quilt pulled from storage and spread out under sunlight. One Saturday morning, the HOA held its first real meeting without Karen in nearly a decade. Mark, now permanent president, opened with free donuts instead of threats about lawn heights. "We're here to make this a community again," he said, voice carrying through the little clubhouse like a promise instead of a warning. Not a battlefield. People clapped. Some laughed for the first time in months. They voted to use HOA funds to repair the public dock, to plant wildflowers along the roadside, to set up a neighborhood watch that actually asked homeowners before marching onto their property. Nobody mentioned Karen by name. They didn't have to. Mike helped organize a lake cleanup the following weekend. Dozens showed up. Families with kids, retirees with rakes, teenagers dragging old tires from the shallows. Mrs. Whitaker brought lemonade and oatmeal cookies. Jenna set up a time-lapse camera to show the whole thing start to finish. By noon, the shore looked better than it had in years. "Feels different now," Mike said, leaning on his rake beside me. "It is different," I said. "Because fear doesn't get to be the last chapter in a place like this." One evening in April, Perez stopped by off duty with his wife and two little girls. They brought daffodils for my porch in a clay pot the girls had painted themselves. "Figured you deserve some color after this winter," he said. The girls chased each other around the yard while Mike grilled burgers and Mrs. Whitaker taught them how to whistle through acorn caps. The lake caught the sunset and held it like a mirror no one wanted to break. Letters started arriving from people I didn't even know, other homeowners in other towns who'd read about the case in the paper. "We fought our HOA too. Your story gave us courage. Thank you for not giving up." I kept them in a shoebox John once used for fishing lures. When it filled, I started a second box. Karen finally got her sentence in May. 10 years. Possibility of parole after 6. But only if she paid restitution to cover the damage she caused. The windows, the doors, the paint scrubbed from my boathouse. The cameras Jenna installed to catch her in the act. Mike read the article twice, then folded it carefully. "She won't come back here," he said. "And if she did? Well, she'd find a neighborhood waiting, not hiding." The developer stopped calling altogether. Another family bought Karen's old house after the bank took it back. Nice folks from Wisconsin with 3 kids and a golden retriever named Daisy, who chased tennis balls straight into the lake, like she'd been born to do it. They planted sunflowers along the porch rail, where Karen once hung her HOA president sign. The irony tasted sweeter than Mrs. Whitaker's peach pie. Summer brought barbecues again. Real ones, not the kind Karen used to shut down because someone's grill was 2 inches too close to the fence line. Kids cannonballed off docks. Neighbors waved from kayaks. Someone even set up a screen on the public beach and played movies after dark while people floated in inner tubes under the stars. Mike rigged string lights across my porch and said John would have liked them. He was right. One night in July, I sat on the dock with my feet in the water, letters from strangers stacked beside me like paper stones. The sky dripped pink into purple, into black. Mike handed me a mug of coffee and sat down without speaking. Out across the lake, someone lit sparklers. Kids laughed. I thought about everything that had happened. Rocks through windows, gasoline cans, masked men, courtrooms, and how the cabin still stood anyway. How I still stood anyway. "Worth it?" Mike asked finally. I looked at the water, at the porch lights glowing behind us, at the cameras blinking steady and calm. "Every second," I said. "Because some places aren't just property. They're memory. They're home." The envelope sat on my porch railing when I came back from the mailbox, plain white with county jail stamped across the top in red. My name in block letters. Karen Thompson's scrawl in the corner like it didn't belong to the same woman who used to wave HOA bylaws like a sword. I stood there a long minute before opening it. Mike came up the steps carrying firewood. "That from her?" I nodded, tore it open. The letter was short. "Emily, they tell me I have to take responsibility if I want parole one day. So here it is. I went too far. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood's future. Really, I just didn't want to lose control. I don't expect forgiveness, I just want you to know I'm sorry. Karen." I read it twice, then handed it to Mike. His jaw tightened halfway through. "She's sorry now because the cell door locked behind her," he muttered. "Maybe," I said softly. "But maybe she means it." I set the letter on the table inside, left it there like a rock I didn't have to carry anymore. Summer rolled on. The wildflowers the HOA planted bloomed along the road in yellow and purple swaths. Kids rode bikes through puddles after thunderstorms. Someone put up a little free library by the mailboxes, and Mrs. Whitaker kept stuffing it with mystery novels and church cookbooks. One Saturday evening, Mark stopped by after the HOA meeting. "We voted to rename the clubhouse," he said, smiling a little. "Calling it Harris Hall now, after you." I blinked. "Me? Whole neighborhood agrees, he said. You reminded us this place belongs to all of us, not one person's rules. They hung the new sign a week later. Fresh wood, white paint, black letters straight and sure, Harris Hall Community Center. I brought a plate of brownies to the first movie night they held there. Kids sprawled on blankets. Neighbors passed popcorn bowls down the rows. On the screen, some animated princess sang about courage, and people laughed instead of arguing about lawn heights or mailbox colors. One evening in August, Sheriff Larkin stopped by on his way home. He leaned against the porch rail sipping lemonade. Developers pulled out last month, he said. Said the neighborhood wasn't interested. I smiled. Good. Quiet summer, he added. Let's keep it that way. The lake held its peace all through September. Leaves turned red, then gold, then brown, drifting across water that reflected them back like a painting. Mike helped me stack firewood for winter. Jenna added one last camera facing the driveway, even though we both knew we probably didn't need it anymore. Mrs. Whitaker hosted Thanksgiving with half the neighborhood crammed into her little living room. Kids played tag between the tables while pies cooled on the windowsill. Nobody mentioned Karen. Not once. Christmas lights wrapped the cabins by December. Mike cut a tree from his back lot and set it in my living room. We decorated it with mismatched ornaments John and I had collected over 20 years. Wooden fish, tin stars, one lopsided angel my daughter made in second grade. Outside, the lake froze smooth and quiet. Inside, the cabin felt warm again. One night after New Year's, I sat on the dock wrapped in a quilt, watching the moon shine across the ice. The cabin lights glowed behind me. The cameras blinked steady red like sleepy eyes. Mike joined me with 2 mugs of cocoa. Whole place feels different now, he said. It is different, I said. We watched the wind push snow across the frozen lake like tiny dancers. Karen Thompson stayed in prison. Rick Barnes, too. The others took plea deals that barred them from ever coming near this lake again. The HOA ran on kindness now instead of fear. Harris Hall hosted potlucks, game nights, pancake breakfasts. People argued about fishing tournaments and fireworks displays instead of fines and threats. The cabin stayed mine. Always mine. Sometimes I opened that letter from Karen just to read the words again. I went too far. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood's future. Really, I just didn't want to lose control. She was right about one thing. Control doesn't build a community. Kindness does. So here's how it ends. The cabin stands. The lake stays quiet. Neighbors wave instead of whisper. And when kids bike past Harris Hall with fishing poles balanced on their shoulders, nobody measures how tall the grass grows by the road. We measure something else now. How far we've come from the night fear thought it could win.